Moon Knight has always been one of the more nuanced and complex characters in Marvel, and unlike most other heroes, he doesn't hesitate to use lethal force. Although he doesn't possess impressive superpowers, Moon Knight still manages to be a massive threat to villains and is one of the most efficient street-tier heroes, with his name alone enough to instill fear. This is perhaps best demonstrated when Moon Knight ended up in a prison full of criminals, an environment that should have been dangerous for him, but he remained unfazed, terrorizing the inmates instead. If you enjoy comic book breakdowns, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. And if you want to dive into Moon Knight's story yourself, you can check out the recommended reading list in the description below. The story takes place during the Devil's Reign event, during which Kingpin becomes the mayor of New York and outlaws superheroes. As a result, many heroes, including Moon Knight, end up in jail. However, this was part of Moon Knight's plan all along. The comic opens inside Myrmidon, a prison used by Fisk's administration to detain superheroes alongside criminals. A D-list villain named 8-Ball is seen chatting with his new cellmate, bragging that he's gone up against big-name heroes and was even killed and resurrected once. He then asks his cellmate how he ended up in prison. The response? Mask beef. That cellmate is revealed to be Moon Knight, much to 8-Ball's terror. Later in the prison dining hall, 8-Ball tries to find a group to sit with. He first approaches the Wrecking Crew, but they reject him. He then tries the Enforcers, who also turn him away. Finally, he makes an attempt with the Death Throes, but they too tell him to leave. Rejected by everyone, 8-Ball sits alone. As he eats, a thug with a crescent moon scarred into his forehead approaches, steals his food, and mocks him, calling him a sorry con. Suddenly, Moon Knight intervenes, taking the thug down with ease. When the thug demands to know who he is and why he's protecting someone like 8-Ball, Moon Knight replies, "I'm the guy who carved that moon on your head," causing the thug to flee in fear. 8-Ball then asks why Moon Knight isn't sitting with the other heroes. Moon Knight explains that he doesn't feel welcome, just like how 8-Ball wasn't accepted by the other villains. Moon Knight then inquires about a villain named Man-Mountain Marco. 8-Ball tells him that Marco keeps to himself and enjoys real food unlike the rest of the inmates. When Moon Knight asks if Marco's a snitch, 8-Ball panics and warns him not to use that word in prison. 8-Ball goes on to explain that Marco is the king of the cage, an underground fight club run by the guards to entertain themselves. Marco is the reigning champion and, because of his value to the guards, receives special treatment. After hearing this, Moon Knight stands and walks over to the thug he previously scarred. In full view of the cafeteria, he beats him down again, then turns to the rest of the inmates and issues a warning, saying they should all get together for a little reunion sometime. Now recognizing Moon Knight as a threat, the prisoners begin to plot against him. Later, as Moon Knight and 8-Ball were leaving for their cell, one of the guards grabbed Moon Knight and told him that he stinks and needs a shower. He pushed Moon Knight into a shower room where 5 villains were waiting to ambush him. Moon Knight taunted them, saying they work fast and that he appreciates it. The prison guard waited outside, expecting the prisoners to take out Moon Knight with ease, but a few minutes later, he saw Moon Knight exit the room covered in blood. Surprised, the guard asked how he managed to emerge from a room with 5 hostile inmates. Moon Knight replied that there are still 5 inmates in the room, for the most part. He then asked the guard about the underground fight club. The guard said they could arrange for him to participate and asked what he needed. Moon Knight requested only one thing: a mask. Slowly but surely, he climbed the ranks of the competition, fighting and effortlessly defeating low-tier villains like Boomslang and Massacre. 8-Ball, surprised by Moon Knight's boldness, asked if he was afraid of getting hurt, to which Moon Knight replied that not fearing pain is what allows him to be a vigilante. He then said that 8-Ball of all people should understand this, since he, just like Moon Knight, had been killed and revived. Mark explained that dead men like them don't feel pain, because pain is what tells a person they're alive, and everything has a cost, and pain is life's cost. He then confided in 8-Ball, saying that prison is bad for Moon Knight. While violence exists everywhere in daily life, in prison it's in the air. Wherever you go, you can't escape it. This environment makes Moon Knight forget who he is. The longer he stays here, the more he becomes like his older self, referencing earlier Moon Knight comics where he was incredibly, and according to some fans, uncharacteristically brutal. He then approached and conversed with Man-Mountain Marco, who taunted Moon Knight by saying that his 12-year-old daughter is more intimidating and that he can't see why everyone's so scared of him. In response, Moon Knight fogged up the glass, drew his silhouette, and asked if Marco could see it now. It was time for their battle. As Moon Knight was escorted to the ring, a guard commended him for his record, saying he'd made a lot of money betting on Moon Knight, but even a superhero like him couldn't stand up against a superpowered villain like Man-Mountain Marco. Moon Knight replied that he wasn't a superhero, he was a wild dog, Upon entering the ring, Marco taunted him again, asking if Moon Knight was ready to die, but Moon Knight assured him that Marco wasn't nearly tough enough to kill him. He revealed that the first person he ever killed was Raoul Bushman, a ruthless mercenary with thousands of murders to his name, and that some low-life street thug like Marco couldn't compare. He then asked whether Marco had heard what he did to Bushman, referencing Moon Knight number 2, during which he fought his archenemy in a brutal rooftop battle and used his crescent dart to carve off Bushman's face, saying he always wanted to wipe that smile off him. As the fight began, Moon Knight used his ability to dodge Marco's punches and even landed a few solid hits himself. But eventually, Marco managed to grab Mark by the foot and threw him into the edge of the ring. Moon Knight quickly got back on his feet and continued the fight. During the battle, Moon Knight kept talking, saying the cage felt like a holy place to him, a place dedicated to violence, and he'd teach Marco the truths found in it. Marco shouted that Moon Knight was insane, to which Mark simply replied, "That's what everyone says." Marco charged and landed a powerful punch on Mark, briefly knocking him down. As Mark lay on the ground, Marco taunted him with a simple, "Get up." That's when Moon Knight remembered the true reason for this battle. Before ending up in jail, he had been visited at the Midnight Mission, his organization dedicated to helping the helpless, by a woman. She said she was scared, and Mark told her that there was nothing out there scarier than him, and that he was on her side. The woman revealed her name, Judith Court, ex-wife of Man Mountain Marco. She then told Moon Knight they had a daughter together, but Marco had been an absent father, never caring about his family. As their daughter grew older, she began manifesting superpowers similar to her father's, and Marco somehow found out. He threatened to take the girl once he was released from prison and raise her as a criminal, and if Judith got in the way, he said he'd kill her without hesitation. Desperate, Judith turned to Moon Knight for help. Mark promised her that she and her daughter would be safe. Back in the cage, Marco celebrated early, thinking he had knocked Moon Knight out for good. But the hero stirred and suddenly ensnared Marco from behind, wrapping his arms around him in a chokehold. Moon Knight then said he'd share a secret with Marco. Not a single cop or supervillain had ever been capable enough to capture him, and there wasn't a prison in the world that could hold him for long. He wasn't captured, he allowed himself to be captured. He came here to teach Marco a lesson and deliver a message. The lesson? Moon Knight will track him down anywhere, even inside a prison. The message? Marco will never see his wife and child again, and if he tries, Moon Knight will do things that will make what he did to Bushman look like mercy. He released Marco from his grip, giving him a chance to respond. But the villain stayed cocky, saying he'd get out of prison and take his daughter no matter what Moon Knight did. Mark calmly told him that he was given a choice. Then, without hesitation, he grabbed Marco and gouged his eyes out, reminding him that he said he'd never see his family again. Throughout the encounter, Moon Knight reflected on how he was slipping back into his old violent ways. When he was finished with Marco, the prison guards stormed the cage, but Moon Knight turned on them too, fighting off several before eventually being overpowered and thrown into solitary confinement. Later, 8-Ball approached his cell and asked if it was true, if Moon Knight really let himself get imprisoned. Mark confirmed it, then revealed the next step of the plan, breaking out of prison alongside the other superheroes and bringing down Fisk's regime. Even if the other heroes didn't like him, he said they could use a wild dog like him on their side.